Hey, everybody, this is the July 20th edition of the Progress Report, and we are looking forward to a great discussion tonight. We have a terrific guest, Jim O'Connell, who will be a long time an advocate for public education in the city of Manchester, and then he did something about it. He got himself elected to the Board of School Committee, and now is the chair of that committee, having got the most votes in the last election for that position.
Topping the ticket.
Topping the ticket, which is pretty neat. And
you get a special name plaque for that in front of you, know?
And
ticket topper or something like that.
My wife has a word for it.
You know, we've been through a lot with education, and education is always a controversial issue in the city and in the state.
Can you believe that? Why? How can that be?
How can that be? You know, look at the way the legislature is trying to tell the teachers what they can teach and what they can't teach, for one example, and the diversion of funds to private
I
schools.
guess, but does it always have to be
stuff.
that way? I guess I was hanging on always. Really?
Well,
I don't
it
remember it being
shouldn't
that
be
bad.
that way. I mean, my reform is just let the teachers teach. We got committed, excellent teachers. But the Manchester School District, even though it's declining enrollment, is still the largest by far school district in the state of New Hampshire, and it faces unique challenges because we are an urban, the major urban center in a state that's largely not urban, and we have all the problems that comes along with that, and so many of those problems end up at the hands of our public educators, administrators, and leaders. So it's
only 35, 36 state reps out of 400 and something. So,
yeah, well, right.
Don't have the leverage we should.
So in any event, that's our issue today. And Jim, thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mike. It's always a pleasure. It's been been quite the interlude since I was last here. So
yeah, it's been too long.
Very happy to. But thank you for all that you guys do and for keeping up your advocacy for the city and for all the things that matter.
Yep.
I would, loath as I am to contradict a man as learned as yourself, I would just say with regard to the declining population for our schools, that actually is not correct today.
Really?
It has been over time, but it's not. So when we had the COVID crisis, which in one sense we're still living in COVID, but the state average, and I'm going to use round numbers here, so the state average was 5% drop-off of kids who dropped out of school during that period, between hybrid and everything else. And Manchester beat the state average in terms of we didn't have quite as many drop out here. So we did have 5%, but I think,
I was speaking of overall student enrollment in the schools.
So it was 5.6 in Nashua, but that's maybe a little in the weeds. But the other thing is that the most recent study we had done was done by Davis Demographics, and that was done in 2000. The numbers were from 2020 into 2021, and that shows a leveling. It shows no decline in our schools out over time. Yeah. So
is that a leading indicator or a lagging indicator?
I think. Well, who knows, right? We'd all be rich if we could know which, in terms of markets and things, what are lagging indicators, leading indicators. But there is an increased volume of building going on in Manchester. So. And so the housing stock is increasing in Manchester
rapidly.
Yes. I mean, there are 1,000 units under construction within a stone's throw of Elm Street. You go over to. There's 300 units going up out on Smith Road Extension behind Fox Hollow. There are 260 units going up behind Murphy's Tap Room. There's that new 8-story high-rise or mid-rise going up next to the hotel where the Athena or Athens restaurant is, and there's a lot more in the planning. The Pearl Street lot. And
is a lot of this housing going to be for people with kids that are going to be going to our schools?
Well, so I don't know. I'm a little bit. This is not my first area of expertise, if I have any. But it's not as though we're building studios for one person. and there are 2 and 3 bedroom units being built, so and housing being built, and
Yeah.
so and the demand for housing, as everybody knows, and
Huge.
we see it in terms of homelessness, which is having a huge impact, which we could visit at this program if you like. But you know, a guy I know, his house. He put a house on the market last week, and on Lindstrom, I think is a street off of Wellington Road in Ward 6, $1.15 million. And that's one of a subdivision, so they're all worth 1.15 million. I remember my good friend Dan O'Neill being apoplectic at a Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, when there were some houses for sale in Manchester for 800,000, and he declared himself to be incredulous that such a thing could happen in the city of Manchester.
And now we have well above that.
We have, and so
Wow.
and
And
so
that's,
that.
those the locations. That's actually in the city.
That's in the city.
proper.
Well, that's
It's not
Ward.
out,
That's
you
Ward
know,
6. You know, people talk about Ward 1 and 2, perhaps. Well, it's Ward 6, it's Ward 8, it's Ward 12. So I'm not saying that there are $1 million properties everywhere in Manchester. I'm saying that there is a demand for housing in Manchester, and we see that in terms of homelessness mostly. So I'd prefer to concentrate on that end of the market rather than the end who are doing very well. But so we it is unclear what the population of Manchester schools will be out over the next decade. The numbers that we have, which are only a year or so old, would suggest that it'll remain the same. For the purposes of planning the long-awaited and about to come long-term facilities plan, it's easy to the easy 13,000 is a really nice number. It's harder for an Irish guy to say because it's that 13 thing, but
10,000.
and 1,000 too. Yeah. It's a double whammy. Why couldn't they said 12? It's so good. But because we have 13 grades, right, from pre-K through to senior year. So generally speaking, and of course it's not true in every grade, but generally speaking, we have 1,000 kids a grade. And generally speaking, we will have 950 kids a grade to 1,050 kids a grade out over time. And, those are 5% differences, a 10% spread altogether. But that's kind of, we're in there. So we can plan based on that. But I think we need to plan for an upside. The other thing is that we have 1,700 kids in the city of Manchester who go to alternative school locations, homeschool, private school,
Charter schools.
all kinds of schools, and some of those are good, some of those are okay, and some of those are atrocious. And I don't want to. We don't have to have that battle. I think it's just the battle I would have is just that. The easy declaration that, private schools or charter schools are better, the facts don't actually demonstrate that.
Right,
so
right.
The national facts don't support it, and certainly the facts in Manchester don't. And since I want to blow our trumpet for a minute, because we have a lot of problems and a lot of things to deal with, we do have the Manchester School of the Year in the city of Manchester, Highland Goffs Falls. Beat all comers.
We've had a number of schools win major awards here in the city, haven't we?
We have, and not that I had much to do with it, I'm sure, but the school board last year was named the school board of the year in the state of New Hampshire out of 165 school boards.
I did not know that. Congratulations.
Yes, so yeah, do we have problems? Absolutely.
Was it a financial reward prize or a trip to Oklahoma?
No,
What did you win?
Nothing. Other than we got to say that a couple of times to the naysayers. I described it, when we look at the landscape for education in Manchester, I'm reminded often of Donald Rumsfeld's infamous saying about, I need a target-rich environment. And
he has so many. That's a good one.
We're in a target-rich environment because we have challenges. We have school buildings. The average age of our school buildings is 70 years old. Some of them are well beyond their useful life. They should have been replaced a long time ago. They were never designed to stay this long. And the taxpayers of Manchester have been, frankly, wasting money on them for years. And that needs to come to an end. And I'm looking forward to bringing it to an end. But it will need a change of mindset in Manchester.
Well, how do you bring that to an end? You don't, or do you just close the old schools and move people to the newer facilities? Do you build new facilities? There was talk for a while about this glorious mega high school, perhaps. I understand that that's not that's been completely buried and gone now.
Well,
so what do you do? How do you get rid of that?
Well, starting from the start, if you were elected a term and a half ago, you might suggest to the board that they start and do a proper inventory and have people come in and tell us, and which we did, and then that report was done. The Davis demographics was done. Dr. Goldhart, Dr. Goldhart was a superintendent here. I don't want to. I don't want to be critical of Dr. Goldhart. Can't be inside his mind knowing what else he had to deal with. I certainly know he had COVID to deal with, and that's enough of an excuse for anybody. But the fact is that process got interrupted, and so we're back at it now. And the plan was to have the long-term facilities plan, the big, statewide headlines. The thing everybody was waiting to be announced was to be announced in June, and in June we got. Well, if it was the turning on of a faucet, it was a little dribble, and somebody forgot to connect the hose. So the hose is going to get uncorked, mixing all kinds of metaphors, for the end of August. And I expect at the end of August we will see. We can't continue as we are right now. We need to consolidate high schools. There's no decision taken, so this is important. There's been no backroom.
Waiting for the report.
Yeah. So, but clearly there is support across the community. I think there's built up a pregnancy in waiting for the answer. I can say I'm very much in support of building a new high school. I want to go with a 2 high school solution, and so I think it's obvious.
2 new high schools, or one existing and one new?
One existing and one brand new.
Oh, really?
And again, I describe this like, it's like if we were going to go to, if the 3 of us and our families were going to go to Portsmouth next weekend, I think we'd all make the presumption we're going out 101. But we might end up going out Route 4 if we had to pick up a parcel in Portsmouth, in Concord. Or we might, for some strange reason, go around 495 and come up if something else dragged us there. But the 101 route is kind of obvious to me.
Right.
So we go with the 2 high school solution. We'd have 2,500 or so person high schools. I think for me it seems obvious that Memorial is the one to stay standing at the end of this process.
Really?
and gets modernized. I can't see spending $200 million on a new high school in Manchester while having the second one languishing in its 1950s clothing. So that's what I'd expect, but I'm 1 out of 14. I want to be very clear. This is just Jim O'Connell's rantings.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we had you in here. That's exactly why we had Jim. Now, under that scenario, obviously Central and West get closed down, consolidated into this new school.
Right.
I assume the real estate will have some value and some function put to it. What about MST? Would that become part of a campus for Memorial? How would that work?
So MST as a building right now, it's very important to differentiate between MST as a building and MST as an entity, as a school.
Understood.
Right?
And I'm kind of asking both questions.
Right. So because as a building, I think it should be noted, much when you cut through the ballyhoo sometimes, you find out that the ballyhoo is not correct. So MST, with all its, all the good things about MST, the fact is that the people of Manchester see fit to have the 9th grade there in portables in the backyard. So that's what we herald as the destination of destinations. Manchester's going to hold that up high. Send your kids here, folks. Mm-hmm. Don't go and look at the school in Dover. Don't go over to Portsmouth. Don't go up to Bow. Please don't go down to the middle schools in Nashua and do a comparison because you'll all leave. But that school also has 14 exemptions from the state just to be allowed it to be called a high school. If you or I built that building and wanted to call it a high school in any normal circumstance, the state would say, well, you've got 14 more things to do. How about you start with do you have a gym?
Yeah.
No, we require gyms in the state of New Hampshire. Do you have, whatever, there's other things. So there are 14 exemptions. And back about 10 years ago when these exemptions were being examined, the cost was $20 million to make those exemptions right. So we still haven't done that. So this goes to like where we are. We look at West High School. We put the district offices into West High School. It's something that I have been beside myself about since the day it happened, and I wasn't on the board when that happened. But But putting that office over there, that office is not ADA compliant. It's the wrong size. When we went there, the internet doesn't work, so we couldn't have board meetings there because we couldn't get the internet working there. when
Better
we
than
were-
having it in the mill over the mill building over there, isn't it, or is it?
Why?
Why?
I don't know. Because it make more cost effective to use an existing school
So,
building?
so I would say what you should do is look at the cost of the condo on that McGregor Street, is it? And the amount of savings that we would have. And after we paid the cost of the moving, I think Karen DeFrancis told the board at the time that change was made that it would be in year 6 and 7 that we'd see some savings. And all we're going to see as savings is the cost of the rent.
Yeah.
No, but when you build a building that's not fit for purpose, if you go
Yeah,
to the
okay.
if you go to the school the offices right now, any day of the week, I challenge you to go in there, and there are cardboard boxes stacked all over the ground. When you walk in, you have to climb in through them. It's like an obstacle course. When you get through the obstacle course, you go up 3 flights of stairs, so you get both a steeplechase and a mad dash and a stair climb. You can do all of those in once just to get in. If you have the misfortune to have a heart condition, have a sore leg, be in God forbid, in a wheelchair, then there is no way into that building. What you actually do, think about this, right? 40 years, 35 years after the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the great state of New Hampshire, 5th, 6th richest state in the United States, the great Queen City of the state of New Hampshire, with per capita incomes in this state, as I said, 5th or 6th highest in the United States, we see fit to build a district headquarters where if you're a person with a disability, your friends can go walk up the 3 flights of stairs. You get to go over and ring on a doorbell and wait for someone to answer. And then they will send somebody from the high school out. That person from the high school will now escort you in through the high school, through the cafeteria, and the kids are very good, I'm sure. But when I was a kid, I wasn't that good, so I might have mocked the guy with one leg. Say, "Hey, Gimpy," who knows, right? I was not a good kid when I was 16. So that's what you walk through. And when you're finished walking, you get to an elevator. You get escorted up in the elevator. Meanwhile, your friends have started their meeting, and you have the ignominy now of walking back across a corridor, and then through another door, and now you're into the district headquarters.
So how many lawsuits have you fielded on
And
this?
I invite them, please, while you're wasting your time with right to know and all these other things, come at us for something decent. Like an adequate education and looking after people who are poor and people who have disabilities.
Well, on that note, we've hit our first 20-minute mark.
I'm learning
Rob.
certainly a lot today, which I am not surprised about. When Jim's here, he gives us a lot of information, fire hose style. It's really good. And folks, we hope
Let's
you'll
remind
call
folks to
in
call
and join
in.
the conversation. 640-3091 in area 603, of course.
And we'll be right back.
The July 20th edition of the Progress Report. And Mike and I are joined by Jim O'Connell, the
The 95-degree July 20th.
yeah, well, it certainly is.
Europe's on
and
fire.
We're learning an awful lot about the state of the state's largest school district, which is Manchester. And
Pulling back the curtain. I mean,
We're really
literally,
pulling back the
we've
curtain.
talked about a couple things where
Yeah.
there's conventional wisdom and common knowledge, and turns out not so much. There's a lot more under the or behind the curtain.
well,
than we
and
thought.
that can lead me to something else we were discussing before we came on the air. I assumed that Manchester was probably having a terrible problem filling up its required teacher corps.
Oh yeah, mass
Because
exodus of
I've been
teachers.
hearing about that. I heard about it from the New Hampshire Democrats saying that there's so many teachers all across the state are, either retiring or quitting to get other jobs, and terrible problems filling the roles of teachers, which is the heart of any school system. And you had some interesting insights on that, Jim.
Yeah, so I want to be careful now. So what has happened? The school board and I think the administration have been waiting for the other shoe to drop in this regard, starting in January, February, March, April, and each month it hasn't dropped. So we've heard rumors. I heard rumors that there was going to be a major exodus from one of our schools of a large number of math teachers, and another school because of some problems that are there. That there was going to be a mass exodus from there. We haven't seen it, but I am concerned about what we're going to see at our first meeting in August. But I can say that so far this year, things have been better than we expected them to be.
What do you attribute that to? You're making your pay scales more competitive.
Right. So we've done
with the rest of the state.
Right. Yeah. So we just passed a new.
let's talk about that.
It was passed by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen last night. So now it's fully effective. But it was ratified by 95 or 98% of the members of the MEA, the teachers' union, voted for it, and it was passed, I believe, unanimously. I think it was unanimously by the Board of School Committee. And I'm very pleased that contract was passed, and it's the first time in more than a decade that school teachers in Manchester had a new contract on the day on a date prior to, albeit by a day or two prior to the old one going out.
That's really great because it has been a long
long
time. I'm aware
time.
of that.
And so
good
it took a lot of pushing and cajoling and convincing, but the school board doesn't directly involve itself in the negotiations any longer. So we've empowered the superintendent to do that. Our new superintendent, Dr. Gillis, came in, and that was one of the things that was on her plate immediately. And I'm grateful to her and to her staff, that Mr. Francis and others who delivered that.
Well, that's got to be a real accomplishment on her part. We've been through a lot of superintendents here in the last
we
decade,
have.
to say the least.
We have.
Some of them we thought were going to stay longer than they did, like Bogan Vargas and I guess Dr. Goldschmidt as well. And now you've promoted from within, and
Promoted from within, which I think is key.
that's working out well in your opinion.
Well, yes, I mean, it's very early days. I think the superintendent, Dr. Gillis, has been acting since the end of February, beginning of March, and she was appointed 6 weeks ago, so it's all very new. But she has been in the district for 3 or 4 years. And it just so the other thing I would just caution also is that there's a national. If you go look about teachers leaving schools, etc., go Google superintendents. At the time that we were looking for a new superintendent in Manchester, there were 15 school districts in the state of New Hampshire who were looking for superintendents at the same time. That's an extraordinary
and
number.
sometimes when we went out on searches, we only got one, or maybe if we were lucky, two candidates
right.
who were actually had the qualifications to aspire to the job.
So I'm very amongst the rich environment of targets. I'm very much in favour and pushing and trying to work on creating a cadre of leaders within the department, within the school district in Manchester, so we will emulate what happens at our fire department and what happens at the police department, and what we saw last night happening with the Department of Public Works, where our good friend Tim Clardy was named to replace the wonderful Mr. Shepherd. So I'm hoping we've started to do that already, but all of these things cost some money. So what we have done is at the principal side, we have promoted people into a principalship for a 1 year period. We've been able to do this because of ESSER funds. So we've been able.
What
to,
is that?
That's the state funding, the federal funding in response. I'm sorry, I don't know but it's the funding that the federal government passed and distributed to the states in response to COVID and the impact of COVID.
So let's go Brandon then, right?
Yeah, whatever that means.
I use it completely ironically. My point is
yes, I know.
that these are federal policies that have come down and are going to actually help the city of Manchester.
Right.
And let's not pretend. I heard a news report today. You know, the state is releasing so many hundreds of thousands of dollars into the school department. Thank you to the state and the executive council.
Right,
Baloney. Where'd the money come from? The money came from Maggie Hassan, Jean Shaheen, Joe Biden. That's where the money.
And if you wanted to know, and people who talk like that, it bothers me no end, and I get a little jaded from it. But we're heading into an executive council election amongst the other elections, and this executive council in the state of New Hampshire, and with including Ted Gatz's former mayor of Manchester, voted the only state in the union not to accept funding from the federal government for testing for COVID for children in the state of New Hampshire. $27 million. We don't need it over here in New Hampshire. This is at the same time as we're eliminating 255 staff members in the Department of Health and Human Services, at the same time as we have 14 children die in the state in a period of 12 months who were in some way connected with the Department of Child, Youth and Families. So put all of that in your pipe and do a little smoking, and you'd see. Sorry,
I didn't mean to get you off track, but I wanted to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah. So that what is done with regard to this thing is that we have created a principalship, which is a 1 year principalship. So now a teacher, let's say at Memorial, who is interested in becoming a principal at some point in the future and has the qualifications otherwise to do it, they get an opportunity to work as an assistant principal as a fourth assistant principal. They're funded for a year. At the end of that year, they can drop back into teaching. Their position is held for them there, through that process, we end up with people ready to become principals, so we can appoint from within. I'm very happy. Just yesterday, well, it's not announced yet, but we just brought another principal. The new principal at Southside is promoted from within. The new principal, there's a new principal that I don't know how public it is, so I'm not going to mention now. But other than people know the vacancies there, but there's a new principal at Parker Varney, and I have nothing against. I think we should go for the best candidate and the most qualified candidate. But why we think that some person working in a village school on the side of a hill somewhere in Monadnock might be a wonderful person and could be the best lady or gentleman, but a person who's dealt with our Parkside Middle School has got 930 kids in it. I describe it as bursting at the seams, but we've got 930 kids, and if you look at the demographics of some of those children, somebody who's a senior staff member in that school has got more experience than most others.
So I wanted to ask you about this, Jim. One of the things that really got me excited was when Manchester Proud emerged under the leadership of Bob Baines, Barry Brenzinger, and many others, very public and spirited citizens, to support our schools. And they seem to have really started off with quite an impressive agenda. Surveying people about their attitudes toward the school, not trying to point any particular point of view, just getting information. Are they still an important factor in our schools, and what credit would you give them for what's happening?
The biggest credit they deserve, and they continue to be an important and ongoing factor. But the first thing they did was to lead us to a strategic plan that came from the community, developed by the community, fully informed by all parties, and so we have a roadmap that we're working against, which we didn't have previously, and it has brought vigor and direction that is key to a lot of what we're doing. Because the number of times that, the number of reports, etc., we had on 3-ring binders, metaphorically speaking, or even actually, gathering dust on shelves was extraordinary. So now we have, and we tie ourselves to that strategic plan. We're committed to doing certain things. We just at our last meeting in July, in June, we passed the new policy for class size in the city of Manchester. That's the second time in a short number of years. So the new class size for grades 1 through 4 is now 20 kids per class in Manchester, 25 kids per class, so those are the maximums in grades 5 and above. That comes out of some of the rigour that we got from the strategic plan. With regard to what Manchester Proud continues to do, well, first of all, there's a wonderful occasion coming up once again on September 17th, which is Educate Ed, a big celebration of education at Veterans Park, which will go on all day. Free food for everybody. We've got Thai food, Mexican food, all kinds of pizza. It's free for everybody, free food and drinks. Everything is free, and then there's lots of entertainment. We'll be celebrating our schools, our staff, and our families at that.
That's September 17th?
September 17th, all day long at
Sounds like a good
there.
event.
It's a great time. The first one was last year. There's a lot of people working very diligently on that. But they also they funded the position of Chief Equity Officer in the city of Manchester. So even though that person works and is under the direction of the superintendent, the money was raised for that position by Manchester Proud for a period of 3 years. So we have that person in place, and then they have their own employee.
No, I don't mean to interrupt
Yeah,
again,
please.
but I remember when that came on.
Yeah.
There was some headwinds to that.
Yes, still are.
And of course there are. How's that working? How's that functioning? How is that making the school system better?
So that's a great question, and it's a question that I have on my list of questions for sort of the first year anniversary, because I can point to a lot of things that are going on, but they're not. But I haven't seen it sort of laid out as we have taken these following steps. I can tell you that the way in which the decisions that we make are informed by the fact that we know that we have in some of our schools majorities, if that makes sense. We have the majority of our populations in some of our schools are not traditional populations, and so it helps to keep that at the forefront that we know that we're very engaged with the immigrant community and with our own, with long-term, African American and other populations in the city of Manchester, who generally were underserved in the past, and sometimes were dealt with very badly, actually. And it's only when you begin to examine some of the stuff that was going on in Manchester schools over the years, it's quite shocking, actually, some of it, and if people are in doubt, they just need to go and talk to some person of colour who was born and raised in Manchester and went to Manchester school system and is now 30 or 35 years old, and they'll regale you with incidents of things that happened to them and the way in which they were treated. I don't think it was awful and terrible. These people wouldn't agree with me on that, but definitely it was there. So we're working on that. The biggest thing we're working on, this is where we get criticism for people who like to throw stones at the school district, is we've implemented for the first time, again in more than a decade, the City of Manchester. We now have a curriculum for math and a curriculum for English. And so when kids go to school, regardless of the school they go to, everybody knows what they're doing. We're spending a lot of money on professional development. There's a transformation going on there, because a lot of teachers, some teachers, look at professional development as almost like continuing ed. Oh, I did my 3 courses, I'm all set for this year. Whereas, as I have been at pains to point out to people, professional development is something, well, I use the analogy of somebody doing a gallbladder operation as a doctor. And, you've done it and you're really good at it. You do it all the time. Actually, you can close one eye and get that scalpel right down the center of the stomach and do that gallbladder. Nobody phoned you up and told you that you could do it microscopically now, and it can be done, with an incision the size of a pencil. You're a wonderful doctor. You've been great for years. You might be the best doctor in the state of New Hampshire, but, somebody needs to tell you there's another way of doing it. And so we're busy trying to lift all boats, basically, and spending the time, the energy, and the money to do that. So, and we're seeing.
I'm really shocked that there was no. I mean, I can understand there would be areas where we wouldn't quite be up to par with the curriculum, but I wouldn't think they'd be math and English. I would kind of think you had that one down, and we're worried about civics and history.
If you remember, under a not so distant regime, I was very agitated about the fact that we had 40-some kids in a math class in 8th grade, and we had a previous administration not that long ago who said that that was probably a good thing, and that we'd find out we wouldn't need that many teachers. We had the mayor of Manchester's child at a class in Central High School with with no seat to sit on. So we got ourselves pretty low before we started coming back. And then with regard to the headwinds that we have people in Concord who are constantly trying to undo us as much as they can, and offering incentives to those who want to undo us further. So that's a difficult
You're talking
environment
about
to be
the
within.
Department of Education.
The Department of Education.
Who is supposed to be helping you,
And
correct? Or am I wrong? Am
No,
I
no,
missing something?
no. It is the Department of Education that, and not everybody there, but the leader there, Mr. Edelblut, who is fully committed to everything but public schools. So
That seems to be true. It's very, very sad to hear. I mean, the man, never had sent any of his 7 children to any public schools. They were all homeschooled.
the part that bothers me, there's just a program. We came before us last month, and these things come, like Trojan horses and thieves in the night. So this group comes before us, and it's free to the city of Manchester. These 2 lovely gentlemen in very expensive suits came to tell us this, and this is a program that's going to help us with our kids who are in danger of dropping out, etc. And they've been paid by Mr. Edelblut already, not from his pocket, but from state education funds.
Sure.
So when you deconstruct it, when you ask them what are they going to do, I asked them what was their special sauce. Like, they weren't going to send anybody to Manchester. They have people on the edge of a phone based out of Colorado, I think, who would somehow find kids who might drop out in Manchester, and then somehow have them online and help them. And I'm thinking, like, we have one truancy officer for the city of Manchester. The position has been open for the last number of months. One. And we know that one of the leading indicators of success in education is the amount of time spent in school. There's a direct correlation between kids who don't come to school often enough and academic outcomes. It's not that hard to work out. So we have one truancy officer to deal with that problem. And Mr. Edelblut sees fit to spend $400,000 to bring a company in from Colorado who's going to solve it digitally. But he takes that, we'd love to have the $400,000, but you could put that after the money he spends on Prenda and the money that he spent on privatizing, the voucher system. And, he just announced last 2-3 weeks ago that the so-called voucher system that he originally told the House was going to cost $250,000 annually, which ended up costing $8.4 million. But to add insult,
after they went out and solicited door to door, literally.
So now they just hired somebody in the Department of Education at $115,000 per year plus loaded cost to be an advocate for that program and to help people who are in that program. While they're already, I'm sorry if I'm losing folks, 10% of that 8.4 million is going to a private group of individuals to manage the program already. So there are lots of snouts in the federal trough, and those people who dislike and distrust government should look much closer to home. They don't need to go down to DC. They should go to Concord and have a look at the self-serving. What's going on there with regard to education is quite shocking.
Well, with that, we've reached the end of our second segment.
I want to continue with Mr. O'Connell.
Well, I was looking forward to the rant at the end of the show, but we could do that. Why don't we take a break and we'll bring Jim back if he's willing to stay?
I don't think we've any.
We're learning a lot. I'll tell you that.
We're learning a lot,
another show.
and we are so pleased with the I think what you're giving us.
All right, hey,
Office
we'll
is
call
a
an audible. We'll
lot-
call an audible,
we'll
man.
call an audible.
We'll do
we-
this on the fly. We'll be right back, folks.
We'll
Hey,
be fine.
We're going rogue. You got to come back and see.
Going rogue.
See you in a
Mike.
minute.
Hey, everybody, this is the progress report for this Wednesday, July 20th, 2022. We're having a fine conversation with one of our great public servants, Jim O'Connell.
So good we couldn't give it up.
We were going to give it up,
just
but
gonna roll
we
with it.
can't because there's so much that we're getting here, and I must say, most of it has impressed me with its upbeat character, whether it's the ability to retain teachers, the ability to have our schools adjust to the needs of the kids, the Manchester Board of School Committee winning an award for the best school committee in the state of New Hampshire.
Having a strategic
I did
plan.
not know about that, but it sounds like under Jim's leadership, they richly deserve the recognition.
and-
It's upbeat, but there are still problems. You have not sugarcoated
So-
anything.
so
you
I-
have
yeah.
laid out quite
Another-
a few.
ano- Right. Another thing, Dwayne, the work that was rewarded by the School Board of the Year was when my good friend Leslie Want was the vice chair of the board. I don't want to just be careful to give her credit, and it's and the credit is to the board, not to the vice chair. So if we want to talk about the glass half empty, we have lots of major issues. If we go to at Parkside Middle School coming into September, that school is absolutely packed solid.
Is that the one you said 900 students?
There are 930 kids expected to be
Wow.
there. And when the decision was made to put fifth grade into that school a couple of years ago, it was known at that time that in the second year that it would be at 103% occupancy. Now, a school, the maximum occupancy for school, the optimum, is about 85%, sometimes 90%, depending on whether it's elementary, middle, or high school. But 103% is ridiculous. So you talk about losing teachers, etc. We're losing teachers and have lost teachers out of Parkside because we're putting everybody who's a non-core teacher on a cart. So Mrs. Jones, that's a name made up. I
When
hope
you
there's
say
not
put
a
on a
Mrs. Jones.
cart, that means they don't have a regular
They don't have a room.
classroom.
They don't have a
Their
room.
supplies are literally
Right.
on a cart and get
They go from
wheel
room
in and out.
They go from room
They're
to room.
itinerants.
They're itinerants. They go from room to room.
You know,
So
Jim,
that's
I
not
want to
good.
jump back at something.
Yeah.
Though. Earlier in the show, you were talking about numbers that you use for assumptions, and that typically there's about 1,000 per grade.
Right.
And now you're talking about, one school with nearly 1,000. And
Right.
how many grades are in there? That's
Four.
That's four, right?
Right.
So I mean,
Which is about right? If you think about it, you got 4 middle schools. Well, it turns out right today we're in the transition, right? So there's 2 of them have got 6 through 8, and 2 have got 5 through 8. So in a school, so basically in a mature state, if we go 5 through 8 in all 4 schools, then we'd have 4,000 kids in middle school in Manchester, and they'd be divided across 4 buildings, which
Right.
would give you 1,000 a building. So Parkside being at 930 is entirely within that.
within
you
the
know,
plan, but
within-
yet
within-
it's still
Well, the school,
Overtaxed.
the school is just it doesn't have the capacity. So there were debates this year about putting portables back into Parkside, and I'm ready to lose my mind at the idea that after all the years of talking about getting rid of portables, we're now going to go to put portables in at Parkside, which isn't going to happen.
Now,
as I understand
let
it.
me ask something. Are all the carpenters busy somewhere else?
So we haven't
Are
built
we
in-
not able to put a wing on
Yeah.
a school building?
We haven't built a new school in Manchester. The last school that was built was McLaughlin. That was 1997. So that's
while.
more than a quarter of a century ago. As I have said many times in the past, we've 21 schools. If we were to replace, our schools, and if we did one every 5 years, it would take us 100 years to get to having to have the oldest school being 2022. So we've got.
And that school would then be 100 years old.
And, right, exactly. So right now we supposedly, scientific numbers or studies, we supposedly have $150 million worth of deferred maintenance in the city of Manchester on schools. That's the educated number given to us by people who studied it. I know that the number is higher than that because all the pressure was to make that number as low as possible. So we didn't count everything, but it's a reasonable number to start with. But if anything, it's low. This current board put in place a policy where we are now spending $3 million a year to buy down that in deferred
It's going to
maintenance.
take a long time.
There was no number previously, so if a roof actually fell down, then we'd spend the money to do it. If there was imminent loss about to happen, then we would go do it. There was no ongoing. So we're now spending $3 million a year. So if you do the math, if we keep going at the way, if we could stop every slate from rotting, every boiler from getting old, every cracked concrete from cracking, if we could stop it all now, like in a time machine, in 50 years' time, we'd get to where we ought to be in 2022.
Yeah.
That's the plan right now.
But that's the cut in the credit card. But you
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
keep
yeah.
that credit
So
card open.
Well, what I'm saying, no, what I'm saying is that has to stop because
Yeah.
we're just wasting money.
Yeah.
If you were given a business downtown by your parents, and they established it and they grew it, and it was on the corner of Elm and something, and you've been sweating the asset for years. It was a beautiful building. Look at the great buildings that we have. Well, you only have to look at Ash Street School to see the example of what can happen to a building that you invest money in it and it becomes an
Yeah,
asset.
beautiful.
Instead of that, we have buildings that are jaded and tired, and we do there. I want to be clear. There are people working in those schools from a maintenance point of view and keeping them clean and all that. And some of them do extraordinary work. I don't want them to be disheartened listening to me saying it's all terrible. But the fact
But
that
they're old.
Well, there was a plan, if you can believe this, to take the three triplets, which is Smith Road, Gosler Park, and Jewett Street schools, all built at the same time, built cheaply in the 1950s. They had a 30-year life at the time. They're 70, 80 years old. Those schools, the walls don't have insulation in those schools, and so the idea was, because the outer walls, the envelope is not weight bearing, we were going to knock down the outside walls on those schools. The cost for the glass was $600,000 to put glass. We were going to put glass in a 4-inch thick wall at one point. So it makes no sense whatsoever. I go back to my analogy about the building. I didn't finish my point about the building downtown. You've sweat the asset for years. You've got patches in the roof. It needs to be remodeled, and you have it there, and it's an embarrassment to your neighbors. The right thing, the responsible thing to do, and the fiscally responsible thing to do would be invest in the buildings and make them proper assets. Not just in terms of the bricks and mortar, which itself makes sense, but in order to deliver a 21st century education in modern buildings, instead of wasting money on heat. Today, in Manchester, we've put a lot of effort in the last 2 years into bringing kids in for school, summer school. We had 2,000 kids in school, up from 600 the year before. 2,000 kids last summer in summer schools in Manchester. I think it was 1,900. I'm always a fuzzy math guy. But our summer programs were cancelled as of today for the next 3 days because of heat. It was 90 degree plus in some of the classrooms on yesterday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon. And it was intolerable for kids and teachers and everybody else. So it was announced that the programs are closed Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Well, it is 2022. It's terrible that we have schools that we can't actually function as schools because they don't have air conditioning and they're not suitable to be used in the heat of the day. And we have kids suffer that already in May and June. You go to our middle schools, the top floors of those schools are boiling hot during the day when kids are in June, in May and June. So we have we're still struggling.
Didn't they just update all of the ventilation systems in the schools?
We're working
for
on it.
COVID?
We're spending $22 million, and we're doing it over 3 years. So we're about a third of the way through.
I said ventilation. I mean, there's also the component of upgrading
So we're upgrading
HVAC.
the air handling units, and that will have a big effect. Not it's a COVID response issue too, but it actually will improve the quality of air. And there's actually math for those who care that says, in stale air, kids don't learn as well and concentrate as well as they will in nice fresh air. So we're going to be turning the air over. The other thing, we've got two other things happening there, is we're also going to be checking for pathogens. So pathogens would not be transferred because they'll be on most of them. But we're also under an experimental project. We have equipment going into those new air handlers, which will check for COVID. So instead of, you'll be able to check, you'll know the level of COVID within a building.
Within the school,
and it'll give you indications. You'll say, oh, we have a pod here, we have a problem coming up here, and you'll see it in advance. So I know that at some universities, they've been using it at the sewage system. They check
Wastewater,
the
yeah.
wastewater to check for it. So we're doing it in our schools with air, and we're one of a couple of three, I think, cities in the United States who have that program in place, albeit a small way. But we have an awful lot of work to do. I'm glad our teachers got the contract they did. I really feel bad that our paraprofessionals are suffering the way they continue to. And I want to, if anybody who's a paraprofessional listening to this program, I want to tell you, I feel embarrassed by the fact that there are people in Manchester earning below $15 an hour as a paraprofessional in the city of Manchester. I can tell you that the board, in this case, I will talk on behalf of the board because I know the will of the board. The will of the board in the city of Manchester is and has been and is increasingly adamant that that problem gets fixed, and we want it fixed now. So it's just a matter of getting the ducks in a row, and I would expect there to be news on that in August, and I will be very cross about it if there isn't.
Well, good for you. We've been through a tough couple of years with the pandemic. I mean, it's been very tough. I have a wonderful cousin who wrote a book about this, and she's got teachers all over her family about the struggle that the students and the teachers and the administrators are all had with that. And I'm sure that was not unique to just Austin, Texas, where she was talking about, but or Houston, where some of her family was, but Manchester too.
Right.
How did we come out of the pandemic with the Manchester School District? Are the kids still behind? Are they gonna be able? Well, I trust we're all going to be in school starting, when
Yes,
the school
yes.
starts, Labor Day.
So clearly there's an education deficit.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
And so that, and I think, and I've been saying this since very early in the whole COVID thing. I said to the administration, once we got 5 or 6 months in, that the whole idea of trying to make that population whole, in other words, how much did they miss through all the hybrid and schools closed, and let's try and make it up. I believe that's the wrong way of looking at it.
Oh, really?
I would say they missed everything, and how much do we manage to give them?
Yeah.
I think if we look at like strata, the strata of rocks, etc., when we look at the kids, depending on which grade they were in going through COVID, we're going to see the results of that out over time. It'll be our job to mitigate it and make it less. The good news for folks watching and for parents, etc., is that it's true of every other kid in the United States. So whatever effect
Their cohort will
Exactly.
will all be in it together.
Exactly. So whatever.
That's
exactly.
very cold comfort, Jim.
It is cold
and,
comfort.
And let me tell you, I'm going to throw some
Yeah.
more cold water on that because I have said many times on this show, I am a firm believer, and you use the word, in urgency in education.
Right.
I first said this when my granddaughter, who's 16 now, was just going into elementary school, and we were having problems, and I was very concerned because her first grade is her first grade.
Yep.
Tomorrow, you can't redo that first
Right.
grade. The time is lost.
Right.
And so I'm kind of being more of a
Well,
sourpuss.
no,
than-
let me just be clear. I want to be something clear. When I say that strata is going to be there, that's not an excuse for not doing anything. I was trying to be realistic about it. I'm saying rather than pretending that this is something minor that we can make up the dip, this is catastrophic, right? Like kids have effectively lost a year,
And
so we need
piling
to all,
my question on there, is it even possible, given the job in a good year
Right.
of educating kids, to try to backfill like that?
So we are
Or
ba-
do we
and
have to
that's-
think about a different way of education to get to a longer term?
Well,
You
we have to.
understand what I'm trying to
I
ask?
do recognize that. So that's the reduced class sizes. Having 30
Okay,
kids in the
okay.
class and having 20 kids in the class is a huge difference. We need the buildings to do that, right?
And now you've got some policies on that.
Well, we have a policy on it, so 20 kids in
I
the
see.
class.
So that's how you
there.
solve that
The
problem.
summer program going from 600 kids to 2,000. That's directly in response to that.
I got it.
And we have spent. We got 93 million. Think about this. We got $93 million of federal money. Thank you to the federal government, with no help from others. We got $93 million that has to be spent over 3 years, and we're using it for different purposes. One of them is the air handling issue. It isn't just free to spend on anything; it has to be spent in certain ways. So the response to air handling is a direct example of this. So
But that frees up funds to go elsewhere. Money's fungible, right?
yeah, except that in the
Except
case
if we
in
were
the
never
case of the
paying
air
that
handling,
anyway.
we would never have the air handling. But our budget this year will be $187 million. It would have been $89 million, but the Board of Mayor and Aldermen kept $2 million for themselves. Not for they didn't like it when I said this. They got very upset with me, and most of those people, I like those people. They're all good, but the truth is the truth. The Board of School Committee submitted a tax cap compliant budget.
Yeah.
And we'd also submitted a needs budget, the one we really needed. I voted against that this time because the one that was produced was a joke, and it was an embarrassment, and it was at $1.5 million more than the first one. We're $50 million off per year generally, so I didn't want to touch that. But we did submit a tax cap compliant budget to the board, mayor and alderman, and they saw fit to take $2 million of it and keep it for themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's
Well,
they have good reasons for doing that too.
Our
I know.
good friend Pat Long tried heroically to give you financial autonomy in the Board of School Committee.
did.
I hope someday that will come to
Well,
pass.
well- I'm a
firm
and we
believer
can
in
join,
that.
Yeah,
and we
I'm a
can
firm
join
believer in
Concord,
that.
and that the school district should have its own
Ho-
funding authority.
Hopefully that will come back again.
Hopefully it
in
will.
the next time round. But yeah, so I don't want to take.
Yeah.
I know that
We're
I've
at the
taken
time
on-
limit.
We're
yeah.
kind of at the
Oh,
end.
are
Jim.
we? I was,
But
I thought,
you
I was
know,
going in deference to Mike. I was going to open the doors to the rant, but so,
I just want to say I think Manchester's so fortunate that we have public servants like you. I mean, this has been a great report, and a lot of it was quite upbeat. I'm leaving with a feeling much better about the Manchester School District than I thought I
Stronger
would.
than weak.
yeah.
And I know you got problems, and I know you're going to address them with energy and vigor as you do everything.
Well, and I would say thank you. And first of all, thank you for those kind words, and you know, I do appreciate that, and thank you. You know, I'm one person. There's a whole board there. There's
There is a whole board
There's a
there.
lot of great
And
people
an
on the board.
administration behind you,
and
and
a great
cadre
admin-
of teachers
yeah,
and
we
principals.
have
Yeah,
lots of great
it's a
people.
team.
But I want to say to those people listening to us who know the terrible, you know, problems that we have in our school district. I'm glad I said everything that I said here today is true and right. We didn't spend the time that we could have spent on the negatives. And I just want to recognize there are real people like you and me that we know well who know there are problems in the school district and maybe shaking their heads going, what happened to Jim O'Connell, our you know, firebrand who would fight for us, and he's now on public television telling everybody that it's great. I know it's not great.
Well,
I know we're working on
I
it.
know we didn't get to that, and we'll
Right.
have to have you back to talk about
We'll do that another
what
day.
your priorities will be.
We
for
are
fixing
stepping on
things.
the other show. Folks, thanks for watching. We
Thank
will
you,
see
Jim, for joining us.
next
Thank you,
week.
folks.